everyone, I'm back Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris back with my rant stroke thought of the day. And there is only one thought and one potential rant, slight rant, mini rant, diet rant, if you will, to talk about. And that is the fallout from Newcastle United's talking. Yes, another talking where the board have talked again, which I'll get into in a second and tell you my feelings about that. Where they had an event at the Stack. They love using the Stack. They have to use the Stack for many things. Talking to the fans is something they definitely use the Stack for. So they were talking on the stage. That was the new CEO, David Hopkinson, and the new sporting director, Ross Wilson. Just the two of them on the stage with old Razor, Matthew Ray's back. And there was a group of fans there. Obviously, we're talking to them about numerous things. One big headline out of a lot of it. There was journalists there as well. I didn't go. I didn't watch it in terms of the stream. Which you can sign in for. I don't know if it goes to my spam, that kind of a thing. I just didn't see it anyway. I was otherwise engaged, shall we say. But thankfully, YouTube is great for content, and the likes of the Geordie Journos and Adam P as well. Big shout out to those two for talking about what was discussed in the meeting as well. It's very good for the likes of those other content creators who missed it to talk about it. So the main take really from this was, for starters, it was only Hopkinson and Wilson on stage, and that shows you the kind of guillotine effect that's gone through the club in the 100-day assessment since David Hopkinson has been appointed as a CEO. He said he was looking to take 100 days to kind of assess as to what's gone wrong at Newcastle. And listen, don't make any mistake about it. Something has gone wrong. Gone are the days of Darren Neal's drinking and partying with the fans in the lead up to the Carabao Cup, and Peter Silverson sneaking on stage at fan podcasts to talk about his great plans and everything else that he had in store, because it was all talk and no action. Nothing really happened. Now, there is mitigations for that. There's issues for that, which I'll get into in a second, regarding spends in Premier League and boundaries and restrictions and all of the stuff that we know exist in that horrible world of FFP and PSR. But there hasn't been enough done behind the scenes. There hasn't been enough done by the old regime that was there. And whether it's the PIF being disengaged or whether it's just the people that they put in position weren't quite up to the task, whatever it may be, but something definitely went wrong. Went through two sporting directors, Pete Mitchell, that's Top Gun. You can be my wingman anytime. Paul Mitchell, I like Pete Mitchell, he's a maverick. Paul Mitchell was a terrible appointment as the sporting director. We all know that. Most of us know that. Even Adam P said it when he watched the thing last year at the Stack. He said he didn't get a good vibe from Paul Mitchell from the start. He was a prick. People say he was best in class and all that kind of stuff, but he clearly wasn't the right man for the job. He was a massive reason why the Alexander Isak situation happened the way it happened, because whether Amanda or Murdad overpromised this kid something, you could have handled it better than just swing your dick, smack him in the face and go, fuck off, get back to work. That's basically what Paul Mitchell did. So that's all gone through. That was on Darren Eales for me. Now, I know Darren Eales has been ill, and I do sympathise and empathise with that, and that's the reason he's had to step down. And I wish Darren Eales nothing but good health and happiness in his life. I hope he gets better from his illness. I genuinely, sincerely mean that. But in terms of what happened on his watch in Newcastle United, I think Mitchell was a dreadful appointment. I think commercially things started to get away from the club, whether we lost our appeal, whatever it may have been. Maybe those boundaries were in place. Was it the ATP rules, the PSR rules, the FFP rules, all the stuff that was there. But I've got issues as well with regards to selling of Anderson and Minter as well. I don't believe that happened, whether that was a board level thing or an Eddie Howe level thing or a mixture of both. I still believe we could have got out of that in a better position than we did. We'll never know, because no one will ever tell us. But I think that was a real fuck up from upstairs as well. And that's definitely caused unrest, and it's halted momentum of this project, this exciting project that we were all excited to be on board with. Yes, we know for a fact that the Saudis weren't able to splash the cash like they would have wanted to, because they would have just dropped 500 million quid on any transfer budget. We could have bought the best in the world if we wanted to, like City did before, like Chelsea did before. But the Premier League don't want that happening again. They want to protect, the 4 to 6 clubs that sit at the top of the table, the very 4 to 6 clubs that try to fuck off and join the Super League and suckle from that corrupt team, which still is in the background, by the way, swinging around. So they haven't left that whole scenario just because of the complete vitriol reaction from the world of football and their fans as well, that they decided to pull away from that. make no mistake about it, if they could have, they would have fucked off from the Premier League, and how the Premier League would have looked very foolish then, because they would have needed teams like Newcastle and Everton and Aston Villa, because they would have been the new big four, the new big six. So that's something the Premier League should have considered, but they haven't. So they've pandered to these motherfuckers, and they're still pandering to them by putting the bullshit rules that they've got in place. So I'm empathetic and sympathetic that that's possibly halted our commercial ability to get deals in and sign players and all of the stuff that goes with it. I'm not completely deluded in that regard. There has been challenges for them, but they've gone clearly for a reason. Hopkinson's come in, looked at it, and went, "You ain't doing it, guys. You ain't done a job. Off you fuck, job done," or something a bit more eloquent than that is what he's done. So he was on the stage, he was answering loads of questions about loads of things. He spoke very well. He's a very impressive character. Wilson handled himself quite well as well, from what I'm hearing. They talked about the big draw obviously was a stadium, which I'll come on in a second, in my opinions on that. But they did talk about the keeping a hold of their best players and the Alexander Isak situation. And Hopkinson was very, very clever in that regard. He said, why do they want to leave? We need to get around these players before they want to leave, and make sure they want to stay with us. And I think that's where the breakdown was with Alexander Isak's situation. They should have pandered to his ego. Listen, hindsight's a great thing. You say he went to Liverpool and been shit. He might not have been shit here. He might have been shit here. Who knows? But I feel that's creeping in again with the likes of Sandro Tonali, with the noises that he's made, with the likes of Sven Botman as well. I know he's very injury prone as Sven Botman, so maybe that will put off potential suitors to him, and it will. But Sandro Tonali in particular, that comment that he made not too long ago, I'm a bit concerned as to is he going down the same route as Alexander Isak. So this is a big test for the new regime if they can get around Sandro and try and convince him that his future lies at Newcastle United. We need Champions League football for that. It's still going to be a challenge, in my opinion, but I'll come on to that in a second. But the big draw at this whole thing, like I say, David Hopkinson talk about the financial complexity behind the scenes. I think he's referring really to the restraints and the boundaries and the things that we can't operate in. We need to get a new stadium. There is no doubt about it, because whether you like it or not, modern day football relies on extra revenue, and extra revenue invariably is generated from your ticket sales. You look at Spurs, you look at Everton, even Birmingham City have now superseded Newcastle in terms of getting a new stadium built. I mean, it looks fucking awful, but it's still a new stadium nonetheless. We played against Everton at their new stadium. I've been in Liverpool near that ground. It's a lovely stadium. Not been to it and sat in it, but I know a few people who have went to the game and they said it was excellent, and that new stadium will be packed out by Newcastle fans. There's no doubt about that at all. There's a huge waiting list for people to get tickets and get season tickets back who jacked them in the past when they were disenchanted. Now, whether you think that's, too bad, sad for them or not, it's entirely up to you. I'm not going to pull you for it, but fans want to get to the stadium. New generations of Newcastle fans want to get to the stadium, and we can't get to the stadium because there is no space. There's no tickets. We can't get there. The Magpie members ballots that you never win. People in other countries in the world seem to win them ahead of you in America and everyone else. I don't win ballots. I've not won a single ballot since I've been in. And the only games I've managed to go to is, thankfully, guys who reached out to me nicely and said, my brother can't go, my son can't go, my sister can't go, my friend can't go. Do you want to ticket me? And transferred it legitimately through the old scheme now. I say legitimately. Sounds like I'm lying. I'm not. It's truthfully legitimately. They've transferred it to me, as you could, because you can't do otherwise now. But that's the only way I've got a ticket. That's the only way other people get a ticket. Maybe you watching this, that's the only way you get a ticket, is if somebody can't go and you get their ticket. But Newcastle have got a big problem here, because fans who are Newcastle based can't go. Fans outside of Newcastle can't go. You look at somewhere like Carlisle that historically would have went to Manchester United and Liverpool and City to become fans. They'll be looking at Newcastle now going, hey, they're really good now. They've progressed. They've got new owners. They've got good players. They won a trophy, Champions League. These young kids might go, hey, I'm a Newcastle fan now. And they want to come to the ground. And there's no reason why they shouldn't come to the ground. But the fact is we can't fit them in. Now, David Hopkinson burst everybody's bubble here, and he said, when asked about the new stadium, 3 words, I don't know. Basically, and that just tells me they've come to a complete impasse about this. Now, whether the previous regime have tried hard enough or not, I'll leave you to decide what you think about that. But I think the major issue that we have on this situation, and the reason that there's no spades in the ground on the stadium, for starters, I'll get to the training ground in a second, because I'm less forgiving on that one. But on the stadium, the big issue that we have right now, you cannot extend St James's Park. They've done the feasibility study. You cannot extend St James's Park because of its location to houses. You You can't lift up where the Leazes end is because of the flats that are there and all of the noise. We know all about that stuff. You can't extend, you can't dig down, you can't turn the pitch on, you can't do all of these things, right? So Newcastle are fucked in terms of extending St James's Park. We all really know that. Leazes Park, I think, is the best option on the table for Newcastle to have a new stadium. It's right next door. You know, we can play in the stadium and then move across, a bit like Spurs did with White Hart Lane to their new stadium. So those are the kind of things that Newcastle have probably put in place and tried to look at. Now, I think there's been kickback locally in terms of people not wanting them to ruin Leazes Park. Leazes Park might mean a lot to those people. There could be places where they walk their dogs, you know, where old couples walk together, or you know, it's got you know, an affectionate pull for these people. They don't want a big, massive stadium in there with rubbish in whatever green spaces are left. You know, I kind of understand that, but Newcastle have got a real issue here because at the minute the fan base has outgrown the capacity of St James's Park. That is pretty clear, and that's been clear for a long time. So to grow as a football club, to bring in extra revenue, to keep players like Sandro Tonali, you know, and Sven Botman and you know, those kind of players, and to bring in new players of that kind of ilk, you need to have more revenue in the club. Now, if you can't get it in your gate tickets, you've got to get it from your sponsorship and commercial deals. But because of the restrictions that are in place, because of ATPs and all that, they can't really do any deals with Saudi-based companies. I mean, the PIF have got their thumb in pretty much every fucking pie in the world. I'm looking through a camera here. They probably own shares in that. I wouldn't be surprised because they're everywhere. They're in Disney, they're in X, they're in everywhere. You know, the PIF have got a thumb in every pie. But if the association with the PIF is in that business, the Premier League will halt it before it even gets to the table in terms of doing commercial deals with them. So that's where I empathize a little bit with the commercial and financial complexity that David Hopkinson references behind the scenes, because that is a problem for Newcastle because of who owns them and because of how many investments are involved with. It probably means they can't, you know, do deals with a lot of these companies, and that's the way the Premier League have designed it. 100%. Don't you think anything other? The Premier League, when the Saudi Arabian PIF bought Newcastle United, shit themselves, broke the emergency glass, and pulled out any rule they could to stop Newcastle being a City or a Chelsea, because the likes of Liverpool and Clippity Clop and all them lot went crying to the Premier League and said, you can't do this. You can't let them do that. They're going to just steamroll everybody. They're going to take all of our players. They're going to buy everybody else. You can't do it. And then they went, oh, shit, you're right. We can't do that. And that's exactly why Newcastle haven't been able to do what they could have done. But what they have done in the 4 years is signed very good players in key positions, brought in a very good transformative manager. It's taken them from A to B, which is, you know, a European team, a team that can compete for trophies in terms of domestic trophies. They're not quite a team that's a mainstay in the top four or a title team. Now, to do that, that's a huge level of revenue that needs to be put into the next level. You know, you're talking about spending 200-300 million quid every single transfer window, if not more, likes of what City have done. Even City have slowed down a bit over the last few years because of the financial restraints that are in football, because even though you're doing it to stop Newcastle growing, City can't then continue to grow and go up levels and buy better players in than they've already got. They've got to sell players to bring players in. So you got to do a bit of trading. So Newcastle are locked into that next level of their journey. Now, the Saudis want to be number one, and Hopkinson said that. You know, he talks about Real Madrid, how they're a level above, they're levels above. Real Madrid have got the ability and the freedom over in Spain to just do whatever they want. Them and Barcelona are basically the heart and lungs of the La Liga, effectively, in terms of what Spain believe, and the royal family, Spain, everything else. So therefore, they will always let Real Madrid and Barcelona break as many rules as humanly possible, because they need them for the commercial viability of their league, but also their country as well. And that's why Barcelona and Real Madrid are allowed to get away with whatever the fuck they want to. I don't watch La Liga religiously. I'm not a La Liga fan. If there's any Spanish fans in the comments, we played Bilbao recently, or Athletic Club, sorry, you know, and Atletico Madrid. Let me know in the comments below if that's right, because it must feel to the rest of La Liga that these two get special treatment and everyone else gets fucking bupkis, because that's the way the Premier League is. The difference is we haven't got two teams, we've got four, probably arguably six. And that's where Newcastle are. They're in that weird echo chamber of they can't quite get to the next level because of the restraints that are in place. It's like swimming with rocks in your backpack, really, is where Newcastle are. So the Saudis probably know that, but they're so busy with their other investments that they've just left it to the UK team to get on with it. And I think the previous UK team really struggled towards the end. I think the Isak thing was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. They lost a world-class player, a commercially viable player for the PIF, for the club, for the Premier League. They lost him in a really unsavoury manner. And I think that's what spelled the end of the likes of Eales and Silverstone and everyone else who's been heave-hoed. And that's why they brought in a big player like Hopkinson. But make no mistake about it, Hopkinson seems very cut and thrust. And he seems to be a guy that will say, listen, this is not going to get here. You ain't going to be able to do it. He'd be quite frank, I think, with that. And whether he stays or goes, I don't know. But he seems like a very frank individual. And I don't think he's going to pull any punches. So in many ways, I don't mind the talking, to be quite honest and upfront and tell people what the crack is. I've said it. Loads of content creators have said it. Just talk to us, tell us what's going on. So I don't mind that in a way. But if I'm brutally honest, I don't want him to be sitting on a stack talking about what he's going to do or what he can't do. I just want him to fucking do it. He didn't have to do this at the stack. This is probably just to raise more commercial revenue for the stack, really. Bevies and food and all the stuff that goes with it. That's what it is. And yeah, maybe helping local businesses out, I suppose, in the meantime, which is fine. I've got no issues with that. But all these talks that they do, it's all talk and no action. I work in sales, and there's a saying I use quite a lot is that that person's just said loads without saying anything. And that's what people can do. They can blag, they can talk bollocks, they can stand there and talk for an hour and say nothing whatsoever. Politicians do it perfectly well. Every single day, they talk for 20 minutes and say nothing and don't answer the question that was thrown at them. That's what politicians do. And this just feels a little bit, to me personally, you can have your own opinion on it. There was obviously the Geordie journos were very complimentary about the way the lad spoke. Adam P was. I think it's a load of fucking shit, to be honest with you. Just get in the office, get on the phone, get on the emails, do your fucking jobs, get some commercial deals in. Tell us about the stadium. He could have had an interview at the ground, Hopkinson, and did this. Didn't have to have an audience with the fans. I know they're talking about connections with the fans are great and all that kind of stuff. But for me, if I was there personally, I would have just thought, what a waste of fucking time. That's why I didn't go up, because I'm not bothered about it. I'm sick of them sitting on stools talking about what they're going to do. This isn't a new iPhone launch here, with your turtleneck on, telling us how great the camera is and showing us slides of zooming in a fucking butterfly. You've had the hierarchy of this football club, whether you like it or not, viewer watching, they've fucked up. They haven't done what they wanted to do, or what they should have done, or what they could have done. And like I say, there is mitigations there with the financial restraints and all the things that went in between. But the Alexander Isak situation in particular, I think was self-inflicted by the club upstairs. I think that could have been dealt with a lot better. And also, they could have had a contingency plan. And if the kid was that fucking miserable, they could have been out doing the rounds, getting into the players early doors, signing them way before the kid was going to pull the shit that he pulled. And then you got to pay 55 million quid for a lad who's nearly 30 in Wissa, who may be a good player for a couple of years, but he ain't worth 55 million quid without a pants pulled down. Voltamada is a good signing at the cost that he's come in at 65 million. And I think he will be an excellent player, but it was a big gamble. He could have went the other way. But Newcastle were really caught short with that because of the way that they handled things upstairs. And that, to me, is not good enough. If Sandro Tonali is angling for a move, and I think this might be the change in the new board, the new hierarchy, is we're already getting linked to all these midfielders, the likes of, is a Keys Schmidt as well, for example. Talk about Ellie Anderson coming back. Sandro Tonali's made noises about being homesick or wanting to go back to Italy or whatever, right? The club need to get on this shit now, and they need to go out and try and find the replacement for him long before that whole saga plays out in the summer. Don't have a saga. Just say, Sandro wants to go. There's a fucking cost, 100 million. Bye, Sandro. Love you. Arrivederci, and fucking get the replacement, whether it's Anderson or Schmidt or whoever, right? That's what they need to be better at, Newcastle. Don't get caught short again by the Alexander Isak situation. Of course, you need to show Tonali that you want him to stay. I don't want Tonali to leave. He's fucking class. One of the best midfielders I've ever seen in my life. But if you can't give these guys what they want in terms of Champions League football, new stadiums, top, state-of-the-art training facilities, where's that? Where's the training facility? I get the ground. I get the complexity with the ground. You can't extend St. James's Park. You've got issues regarding Leazes Park, potential site. I get all of that. Where's the fucking training ground, guys? Where's that? There's so much land around Newcastle that you could be building a training ground on. They've talked about Gosford Park. They've talked about near the airport. Where the fuck is the training ground, man? These guys have been here 4 years now, and we're still in the same old training ground with a lick of paint on, and some nice, sexy new equipment, right? Which is lovely, don't get me wrong. I'm sure the players are benefiting from it, but the training ground at the very least should have been fucking built and ready to go by now. That is unforgivable by the club, and that is something that some fucker needs to answer for big time, in my opinion, because that's the first impression that players get when they come and look at the club. They come to the training facility and they go, fuck me, this is unbelievable, this, man, look at this, right? That will convince them to come. Once they go to St. James's Park, it's still an impressive stadium. There's no doubt about it. Certainly on match day where the crowd wore flags, the racket, everything, right? But you need training facilities and things like that. That needs to be in place for these players to understand that Newcastle is the place to be. You know, they pull into that training ground up in Benton, right? And it's not fucking impressive when you pull into it, right? No disrespect to Benton, right? You pull into it, doesn't look too impressive. Skinny little tight lane with 3 kids with a fucking ball and a shirt wanting you to sign them. Just sit and sell them down Tynemouth Market, probably. And then they get into the training facility, and on the outside doesn't look too impressive. You get inside, looks a shite side better than it did, but it's still the old small little training ground that we had, you know, years ago. That needs to be squared up, and that pisses me off, I think. And there was no answer about dealing with that either, as far as I can see from the information that I've pulled from this. But in short, my take on this whole thing really is it's all talk, no action. I'm sorry, but it is. You know, it's nice to engage with the fans. It's nice to advise the fans about what's going on and everything else. And I understand why you may have an opinion like that. Me personally, I just want you to do the fucking job, lads. Just do the job. Out of sight, out of mind, do the job. You know, come on fucking X and say new commercial deal with, you know, this company and that company and new training ground plans. Bang, there it is, getting built in the summer of 2027 or whatever. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see the stack stage things and noise like that. I'm not interested in that shit. I really am not. If I wanted to go and watch an audience with somebody, I'd go pay a ticket to go watch a talking with a former player or a comedian or something like that. I don't want the chief executive and the sporting director on stage on stools like Westlife, you know, just basically telling us now it's happening. For me, it's a waste of time. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this whole situation. Were you happy that they spoke to fans? Were you there? You know, did I miss anything? Is there something that they said that was really cool and really key? Or are you disappointed as well about the new stadium and the training ground? Where the hell is the training ground? What's happened with the stadium? You know, we're just destined to be St. James's Park forever now, and whoever's not got a ticket and can't get a ticket, you're not going to get a ticket, whether you're a member or not. It doesn't really matter. But let us know in the comments below what you think about this update. Always like to hear from you. Smash a subscribe below. Help get us to the next milestone. We're over 12,000 now. Thank you very much for everybody giving us that before Christmas. I did say all I want for Christmas is 12K, and you did it. So thank you very much. You Mariah Carey'd me. Thank you so much. I'm not singing, and the throat will not take that high note at this time of the day, I tell you. But thank you so much for that. Remember to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any ever more content. We'll be back with the post-match reaction to Spurs. Make sure you tune in for it. Have a belt wherever you are, and we'll see you later. Cheers.
Heroes celebrate. They have done it.